Welcome to Autism Approved, brought to you by Enzymedica. Now here's your host, Kristen Selby Gonzalez.
Hi, I am Kristen Selby Gonzalez, and you are watching Autism Approved. 1 out of 91 children are being diagnosed between the ages of 3 and 17. That's 1 out of 58 boys. We knew it was more important than ever to bring you a show that offered you hope, resources, and tools. Today I have a very special guest, Dr. Neubrander, and I'm very excited to be here with you and talk about some of the things and wonderful work you're doing.
Thanks. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, I know, when I think of top doctors in the world, honestly, you are one of them when we're talking about autism.
Thank you.
I hear Neubrander. You Google it, you're all over the place. Can you maybe give a background of how you first began on this journey?
I was doing a special kind of allergy shot, knew nothing about autism. I didn't want to know anything about autism. I had a practice that was set up for normal people. And, there was a special kind of allergy treatment that came from Europe that I started doing. And in autism, as you probably know, that anytime there's something new, everybody jumps on it. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I had 25 families with children with autism who were coming to me to be helped. And I didn't know anything about it, so they'd come into my office, I'd give them this special kind of treatment, but they sort of ruined my office. I had 3 fish tanks. They were these long, narrow ones, and I have more dead fish in heaven because when I was back in the room doing something, they would be looking and climbing on my fish tank and went on the floor. So I have, signs in fish heaven, do not, they don't like me in fish heaven. So I just never wanted to see another kid with autism in my life. They tore up my office. Once they ruined a $2,000 piece of equipment running away, and that happened. That's where it really changed my life, because I was to do a physical exam on this kid. He's running around. All of a sudden he tears off the counter this $2,000 piece of equipment, totally broke. The mother's, of course, embarrassed, and I was nice, and I said, that's okay. And we were talking back and forth, the mother and I looked, I got the child, I put him on the table, and I looked in his eyes, and I all of a sudden knew that he knew everything I was doing and saying that we were doing. And it literally, it broke my heart. I knew then I was the person with the problem, and I knew that he couldn't get out, and my prejudice, my bias, my looking at the mothers who were in the stores, the kids running around, and I was the person who was looking at them like, what's wrong with you? Can't you get your kid in order? That was me. And then I realized I was the person with the problem. The kid broke my heart. He didn't break my heart. He changed my life. It's the single most life-changing event I had with this. And from then on, I knew that I just had to help him get out. And since then, I've been able to help many of them get out, and others who don't get out much further along.
Wow. And how many years have you been working in the community?
I've been in the community since '88. Finished medical school in '75. Started out as pathology. Ended up not wanting to do that the rest of my life. Did nutritional things since all along. Then in '88, I began the journey I'm sort of on now. Saw my first child with autism in 1992 in medical school. We were told that if we see one in our career, it might be the only one we see. We'll never see 2, and obviously that's not what it is. By 1997, I started doing it big time, and so that's it. And now I've seen somewhere around 5,000 children on the spectrum, about 10,000 parents, and we get a high percentage of the kids, almost all of them, towards recovery.
Wow.
Many of them to recovery all the way to.
Wow, that's just warmed your heart.
So it's like, it's nice because the parents have been told there's no hope, nothing they can do. Just go ahead and, sorry, there's nothing they can do. Maybe take a little Risperdal and Abilify, that's it. And those don't fix a kid. Those might take a symptom away, but they do not lead towards recovery. They just lead toward, being able to have parents have a little sanity for a day or two. And it's sad because they're told there's no hope, and that's not right. That's flat not right.
Now, do you believe that the age matters when you see a child?
Yeah, the age matters. The younger the more. Let me back up. Age definitely matters. If I get a child between the age of 2.5 and 3.5 years old, I have a much greater chance to get them all the way to recovery, completely, where you can't tell them from a neurotypical kid than someone else. So as the age goes up, the ability to get all the way to recovery gets narrower, but it doesn't matter how old they are. I've had kids, 37-year-old kids and 45-year-old kids and 52-year-old kids, I mean adults of course, who have autism, who we've been able to do things to that we've made significant difference with, to their lifestyle, you know, how it affects either the institution they're in or their parents if they're living with parents. It makes a difference there. But as far as total recovery, no. If we catch them before puberty, we have a chance. After puberty, not. It's commonly said if we catch them before 7, but that pretty much discourages people between 7 and puberty, and we do get a lot of benefit there. My teenage kids do very well. After my 20s and 30s, they do fine, but again, it's getting all the way to recovery is much more difficult.
Now, I know you have different protocols that you use. I know one is, I believe, the Hyperbaric and some B12s and different things like that. You want to touch a little bit on that, so kind of explain when did you discover that? Because I know you were kind of like figured that out and kind of led the way to so many of these doctors that I hear them talk about it, but I know where it came from.
Right. Basically, methyl B12 was an accident. So is hyperbaric, the way I do it. Methyl B12 came into my life in 2002 it was what was called the Defeat Autism Now. Those doctors that was started by Sid Baker and John Pangborn and Bernie Rimland, which is no longer there. But when they started that in 95, we started doing this in 97, the think tanks. I sat through many think tanks where they would discuss which B12 worked better. They started doing injectable, and maybe once a week, maybe once a month, and maybe more often, but they would discuss which worked better. Hydroxyformycino, that's all we had at that time. And we'd go back and forth, and we'd say, several of us would say we see things, others would say they didn't see anything, and then we'd talk about which one, and we ended up talking about which one maybe hurt more or less. That was pretty much it. And in 1998, from Japan, it came over to the United States where we could use the methyl form, but I didn't know anything about it until probably 1999 or 2000 when I started using it for the other part of my practice that I still had back then, which was chronic fatigue and environmental illnesses, those kinds of things. And I would use the methyl form of B12 in a very dilute form in an IV that we would give during a certain treatment. It wasn't until 2002, after one of these think tanks and stuff coming back, and says, why don't I use the methyl form? Yeah. Nobody had tried it, so I says, okay. I did it. I gave it to a kid, and within 4 to 7 days, he started speaking in words. He would start speaking in shorter sentences. He might have 4 words, that he might use, but he wouldn't put them together. Now he's speaking to everybody, etc. And it got my attention. It's like all of a sudden, pretty much a nonverbal kid now speaking. It's like, duh, are we onto something here? I didn't know, and that's kind of how it was. It was a total accident. If he didn't speak, in other words, I don't have most kids do that. If he didn't speak, I would have missed it. I wouldn't be here today. So from there, I started doing it. Then we concentrated it so it wouldn't hurt. The first ones hurt like crazy, etc. I started out doing them once a week, then twice a week. I find out that it would wear off in some kids. So now I do it once every 3 days. It has to be subcutaneous injection. It has to be very shallow. It's just subdermal. And that works. It has to be really highly concentrated. So methyl B12.
Explain to them what subdermal means.
Subdermal is just below the skin. If it goes into the muscle, you're treating the toilet.
Yeah, so it's more like in the tissue then.
It's in the buttocks, and it's extremely shallow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how it works. So that's methyl B12. So I found that, and in the course of years, I became known doing that, and in the world of autism, and then the whole thing in 2005, the whole hyperbaric, rage came up. And so I started hyperbarics in December of 2005 with one chamber in my office. Didn't know much about it. At that time, the person who I believe had done the most with autism had been about 1,500 hours, something like that. So we started, and very quickly we needed to get 2 chambers because, again, it's the rage. And just like with anything else, when the rage comes, everybody's jumping on this. So all of a sudden, we had all these parents, and they were coming. Very few people were doing it in the country at that time, so we were one of the first. And so they would come to us from other countries, and then they would say, other countries or other states, and then they would say, well, we have jobs, we need to leave, can we not can't we do it twice as long? So I doubled the hours and didn't know that I shouldn't do that. I was slapped on the hands by some of the organizations that you shouldn't be doing that. It's not been studied. But what I found is that the kids who were doing it longer in the soft chambers, the low pressure, were doing better. So that's how that started. Now, today, I have done something like 100,000 hours of 100,000 treatment hours. They've all been monitored, so it's not like just here's a chamber, go see what you get. They're all monitored. There's about 126 things. If you know what you're looking for, you can see. And so I monitor them. It's about 1,000 kids, about 100,000 hours.
Wow.
And I will say that if it's monitored correctly and the protocols are used right, it works for the majority of the kids to some degree. There's the high pressure, 1.5, 1.75 is what we'll call for the autism community high pressure with 100% oxygen. There's the soft chamber, which is 1.3, which is using an oxygen concentrator, which is much more diluted. And if one uses a right protocol to know how to diagnose it, we can prove that we definitely know a hard chamber works, but we can prove that the soft chamber with the right protocol works for the majority of these kids. And one of the things that's really absolutely incredible in language, I have a speech pathologist from Wisconsin who, I think it's Wisconsin or Minnesota, anyhow, she's a speech pathologist, and let's say her child, I don't remember, I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed, but I think her child's like 4.5, somewhere between 4 and 5, who really had no concept of the WH questions, who, what, where, when, and why, no receptive or expressive ability for that. We did the soft chamber with her according to my protocol, and it's not right for me to go into different protocol here, but as far as the soft chamber protocol, the way I do, and within 30 days when I followed up with the mother, she said, most everything else was in regular sentence, capital letters and everything else with regular, but she said amazing, incredible. Those were all, and explanations were all with, all caps, okay? Wow. And then the rest was written as it should be. So it's not if she wrote everything in caps, she couldn't take it. And when I talked to her, she says, it's the most incredible thing we've done for speech and language. She says, within 30 days, she's asking me, Mommy, where's this? Why is that? She says, what is this? How does that work? Why does this? I mean, so not only did she know all along, because you just don't suddenly get receptive language, she knew it all along, couldn't get it out, just like my kid who broke my heart got me into this. She couldn't get it out. Now she gets it out. She's able to speak and she's able to say it, and she's able to ask the questions. It's been in there all the time. The mother's basically said this is the most incredible. So she was already doing really well on Methyl B12, and then this is it. The two things, the way I do it, the two things according to the protocols that I use, Methyl B12 and Hyperbaric are absolute best things I have going for speech and language, etc. If I have a child who I want to induce language or make it more complex. But again, it depends on protocol. You can't eat twice a week and say food doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the protocols that have proven this are nowhere close to my protocols. What they've done for Methyl B12 to show that there's no changes, nowhere close to the protocol I use for Methyl B12, and the same for Hyperbaric. And so again, food does work if you do it according to protocol.
Now, do other doctors pick up on your protocol?
Many do, many don't. It's like, we're doctors.
Yeah.
Doctors have their issues. We have our issues. So he says it, so it can't be true because I know this. We have our issues, okay? Scientists have their issues, and we're all into our own little things and whatever. So I have my issues too. So for the camera, I'll have to say that I have my own biases too. However, the difference is I've monitored over 1 million dose evaluations personally in my clinic, that I've given since I started this. They've all been monitored the same way, so I have that unchanging, so I can see when I make a change here or there. So for Methyl B12, I have that. For Hyperbaric, it's the same. I have all of these 100,000 hours, it's been the same. They've all been monitored the same, so the parents are all reporting exactly the same way. And they're not able to just tell me a little bit. They have to document it. What I use in the way I do this is I call it a pegboard system. Basically, I give you a pegboard, you the parents a pegboard. It's got 1,000 holes in it, let's say. Cyber pegboard. And I give you and your husband, 1,000 pegs or more. And I tell you, you have plenty for yourself. I tell you to give them to the therapist, the teachers and the therapist. I tell you to give them to grandma and grandpa, the extended family. I tell you to even give them to the dog and cat for real. So therefore, whenever, and I send you home, and I don't let you make any other changes. It's very important. There's no other changes, and you're